we have got eventually to summon the wherewithal to talk about distributional issues. We've got to talk about equity, we have to talk about fairness within generations and between generations. Now, there's a third message here. This is the island of Nauru. I want to talk about economics. If you drew a line between roughly Honolulu and Darwin, Australia, that line would cross within a few miles of the island of Nauru. It's a coral atoll. And Nauru is used to look like this. The Nauruans have lived on the atoll for millennia very well and so forth. Nauru looks now like this. And what began to take place, you're looking at coral pinnacles here. There was phosphate mined out between these pinnacles. Nauru was first a colony of Germany and then subsequently Britain. It finally was freed in 1968. What occurred on Nauru was typical of the larger pattern in the world, but the Nauruans unfortunately sat on an atoll where there's a lot of phosphorus and phosphate rock, which was mined for Western agriculture. In 1968, the Nauruans faced a choice. The choice was to continue the mining. At that time, about 70% or so of the island remained intact, as the previous slides showed. And in 1968, the choice was whether to continue the mining, which was making them rich in a certain sense, but impoverishing the biota and the island physically. And they chose to continue mining the island. Now, this, in the jargon of sustainability, their choice was roughly between what Herman Daly and Bob Costanza called weak sustainability and strong sustainability. They chose weak sustainability, which meant taking the profits from mining phosphate and investing that in the global economy, becoming just like you and me. And so the Nauruans now suffer overweight and crime and depression and alcoholism and all the things that afflict our society, but they're wealthy. As far as the global economy works pretty well. Strong sustainability would have been a very different choice. Strong sustainability would have meant they would have kept the island physical systems intact. Now, this is an interesting parable for a time because it describes in many ways what we've done globally in the extractive economy. And I think we have a message to tell the world as environmentalists that we have to develop an economic system in which prices, in fact, tell the truth, an honest economy. And that economy will not be honest as long as we mine natural capital, as Avery Lovins puts it, Paul Hawken and Hunter Lovins. But that certainly won't occur as long as we subsidize things we don't want in the world. So that honest economy means facing the reality of what we subsidize. The numbers here come from Norman Meyer's little book called Perverse Subsidies, in which he outlines all the things going on in the world. These are probably conservative estimates, but it totals about $1.4 trillion of subsidies that cause things that we don't want to happen, or perverse things, to happen in the world. And then in the United States, among the other problems that we have are simply the way subsidies are played out to support the automobile. Now, part of your group here is working on sustainable communities. We'll never get there as long as we give free rein to the car. And I don't care much whether it's a hybrid car or gasoline-powered engine. One's better than the other, clearly. But the issue here is simply excess mobility, or too few choices regarding mobility. We don't have a choice of getting on, typically in the Midwest, say getting on high-speed trains to get from inner city to inner city on time, cleanly, rapidly, and so forth. Partly because we subsidize cars to the tune of $300 billion per year. You can find higher numbers, you can find a few a little bit lower, but $300 billion is not going to miss it by much. So honest economics. There's another message I think we have to tell the world. This is number 4, and that's this one. I want to illustrate this by this method. This is simply the ability to see connections and patterns. And if we assume the industrial model for agriculture, which is a biological system, we end up with all kinds of problems. One of the problems we have is this, and that is that having industrialized agriculture, we now have concentrated protein supply here in the form of soybeans, which we ship to feedlots out here, which draw down the Ogallala Aquifer, which underlies much of the spine of the country. It has roughly the same volume of water as Lake Huron, which is a large Great Lake, but this is being exhausted. Then we ship out to feedlots here. The one at Dodge City, Kansas, for example, sends 30,000 animals slaughtered per day out, every 365 days a year. 30,000 animals. And then when you confine and feed animals, you end up with antibiotics in the flesh and so forth. And so if you've been eating beef and so forth over a long period of time, you have a pretty heavy body weight of antibiotics and all the associated problems with that. There's more to be said. It's this. Can all of you read that? This is not fake. This is a billboard that occurred about 6 miles from where I live, and a student of mine took a picture of it. Caused a traffic jam, I understand, but connecting dots. Read the environmental field. The issue here is how do we begin to see systems and patterns? Now, for those of you under age of 20, 22% of your generation, your peers, aren't just fat, they are obese. Now, connect that to the drawdown of the Ogallala Aquifer, phosphates going down the Mississippi River, nitrates and so forth. This is the dead zone, the Gulf of Mexico, roughly the size of the state of New Jersey. Comes and goes a little bit every year. That's roughly a permanent feature now in the Gulf of Mexico. Now, how do we connect the dots? In a class not too long ago, I put 2 facts on the board. The one that 22% of our young people are obese, not just fat now, obese. Couch potatoes. And that's, of course, a type 2 diabetes epidemic coming in the near future with the dead zone. Put those 2 facts on the board and explain that to me and all the connections that you can think of that apply to this. I walked out of the room. They had a blackboard that was fully this long, an hour later, filled with connections. Dead and dying towns in the Midwest, chemical body burdens of things we don't want, all kinds of things, foreign policy connections. This is an oil-dependent food system and so forth. Now, for you and for me, as people wanting to think about or develop an environmentally solvent future and sustainable communities, it's important for us to be able to draw connections between things. This is not unrelated to events of 9/11, foreign policy, and so forth. This is making connections, seeing patterns. Now, you've gotten a dose of this already. Let me talk about ecological design. I think we have a 5th thing to offer the world, and that is how we begin to remake the human presence in the world. You listen to Amory, you listen to Bill McDonough, 2 preeminent designers. There's some differences between them, but the short message here is this. We know how to make the human presence in the world in a way that is dramatically better than the old industrial worldview. And it operates like this. It's not a thing new on this slide. But it is making things that fit on the planet with biosphere, where nature becomes the standard. Janine Benjamin, a wonderful book called Biomimicry, talks about how spiders take dead flies and sunshine and make materials stronger than Kevlar, which is the material which we make bulletproof vests. No sulfuric acid, no fossil fuels, no persistent organic pollutants, ambient temperature, biodegradable. That's biomimicry. That's nature doing chemistry that has learned over 3.8 billion years of evolution. Terry Collins, a chemist at Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh, describes chemistry in a wonderful piece in Science in January 5th of this year. Says that nature uses only a small part of the periodic table, but literally thousands of reagent strategies. Whereas industrial chemistry uses virtually everything on the periodic table with very few reagent strategies. Nature doesn't need persistent organic pollutants and create all kind of havoc. We do. Different kind of thing. Nature becoming the standard. Can we design the world, begin to mimic that 3.8 billion years of evolution? Amory Lovins once said that whatever did not work in that period of time was recalled by the manufacturer. We have it already time tested. We get design of things right, we protect diversity, not just biological, but cultural. We account for all costs. We're not nearly as rich as we think we are. When George Bush Sr. said that the American way of life is not negotiable, he simply had it wrong. Osama bin Laden just negotiated our lifestyle down by a couple of $1 trillion for starters. It is negotiable. We are not as rich as we have thought that we are. But when you get design right, we'll pay all the costs. We'll take a systems view, we'll power things by current sunlight, and we'll, as Bill McDonough puts it, we'll eliminate the very concept of waste. We know how to design a better world. For the industrial world, there's some discrepancy whether Bill McDonough said this or Amory Lovins said it, doesn't matter, but it's a great quote. Brute force doesn't work, you're not using enough of it. That has been the motto of the industrial world for a long time. We know how to do things better than that, and it's to begin to pattern ourselves on the natural world. And when we do that, we change the kind of questions that we ask from, can we do it? Is it profitable to do? Do we need it? Is it ethical? What effects on the community? And so forth. So we can begin to rethink the kinds of questions we ask. Those questions ought to begin in a place like this. It ought to be a fundamental task of education. To change the kinds of questions we ask, to finally calibrate those of the world in which we live. Now, this is going to be kind of a brief intro. How do we do design? This is the building that Bill McDonough helped us build. We began this project in 1995. This is the Adam Joseph Lewis Center on our campus. It's the Environmental Studies Center. And let me describe this a bit, because sometimes design appears very abstract and somehow way out there, but it isn't. It's very practical, very real. This is the building. This is east, south, north, west. This is the auditorium. This is the wetland curling around a building culminating in a pond. This is a device that tells time. There's a little gnome in here. The shadow of that pole falls on a marker here, which is the winter solstice. The shadow marches down this line here. That's the equinox of the year. This is all native vegetation of the area that was characteristic of the place prior to European settlement. This is a photovoltaic array. The primary power source for the building is sunlight. There's another building to be built to the west of the building, which will be a straw bale timber frame building that will use a laboratory greenhouse. This is an orchard here. Geothermal well field is back in this area. This is an area for student gardens and so forth. Now, we began this project in 1995. The issue was whether we could begin to develop a model of ecological design. What does it look like? How do you do design? The hardware turned out to be a lot easier than the software. If anybody wants to talk about that later, we can. But here's what we did. The challenges that we set for ourselves, we took this to in terms of the designing the building, the program was developed in 13 public design charrettes. So we engaged the student body and anybody in the community that wanted to be part of the process. And as we said, just y'all come if you'd like to be part of the design of the building. So 13 design charrettes, about 250 people came into the charrettes. We wanted to see if over a period of maybe a decade or so, the building could generate more power than it used. So the idea of being a net energy exporter. Now, Oberlin College is, I think, located in about the third cloudiest part of the world. We've had 2 sunny days this year. I'm kidding about that, but there are not many sunny days. Want to see if you can make a building that function as a zero discharge building with drinking water in, drinking water out. Want to see if we could build a building without compromising long-term health or equity, fairness, and decency and justice someplace else at some later time. Now, that becomes a standard, the aesthetic standard for the building. You've got to then think upstream from the project. If you're causing ugliness, human or ecological, upstream from the building itself or the object, you can't say the object is beautiful. So the wells, the mines, and forests are beginning that entropic flow in manufacturing establishments and so forth. If you're causing ugliness, human or ecological, you can't say the building, whatever looks like is beautiful. And then downstream, if you're contributing to climatic change, robotic impoverishment, you can't say that the building is beautiful. Very different kind of aesthetic standard. So and that's like truth and beauty and justice. You can try to get there, but you never will entirely get there. What was new in the project? Well, in trying to use design as a fundamental kind of pedagogy, this became one of the core elements for the way we proceed. In other words, trying to see architectural as a kind of, architectural design as a kind of pedagogy. That we now teach a generation of students for whom the world has largely become unraveled. And the question in this project was through the context of a fairly small 13,700 square foot building, could we begin to show people how you could reconnect the world? How you could actually begin different processes like solar energy and market for certified wood and that kind of thing. The scope of the goals in the building, I think, were absolutely unique. We want to see the landscape also as part of the curriculum of the building. If Churchill had right to reshape our buildings and thereafter they shape us, the same could clearly be said of landscapes. And these things are powerful because no one thinks of buildings as educational. Think of a shopping mall, the educational messages of a shopping mall. No one ever says them, but they're very powerful. Shopping mall will say 24 hours a day. If you want it, buy it. If it feels good, do it. If it itches, scratch it. Self-indulge. The world is your oyster and so forth. Very powerful messages. Energy is cheap. Materials are available. Don't even worry about recycling. That is powerful pedagogy. No one ever thinks of it as pedagogy. Freeways are educational in that sense. Landscape certainly are educational. And then the building, in a certain sense, would never be done. The question is whether building a sewer brand was put it would learn over time. Can you design buildings that don't just begin with a maintenance and depreciation schedule, but also have a technology trajectory? So that over the course of 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years, the building is actually learning and improving in quality. So those were the challenges. These are some of the unique features. I'll walk through these and I'll show some slides, but these are some of the features of the building. Most all of them are pretty much off-the-shelf kinds of things. We asked the design team that we assembled around this building to give us things that were essentially already work. And the uniqueness of it became the combination of these all in one single building. Here's what it looks like from the east. This is the living machine part of the wastewater treatment facility in the building. This is an auditorium. This is an east wall. One of the things that came through in the design process was the students wanted, in a cloudy part of the world, as I mentioned, students wanted a building with a lot of daylight. And so we put a lot more glass in the building. Normally, as a good architect, would not put much glass on the east side at all because of solar gain in the summertime. This is the wetland pond here, the wetland curling around the building. This is native vegetation that was planted by developed by David Benzine and 2 students and some retired people. This represents the biotic past of the place. These are all plants that were characteristic of this site prior to European settlement. So landscape design is very much part of what we do, and landscape is a pedagogical device. The building is entirely completed. There will be a trellis covering this east wall. This is some of the students working on the wetland area. This is the building at night. This is the south side here, photovoltaic array on the roof. Living machine here, which shows designed by John Todd. This is an interior shot, certified wood throughout the building, recycled steel, low to no VOC paints, varnishes, and finishes. And we begin to think about buildings as systems. We were able to downsize the HVAC, or heating, ventilation, air conditioning equipment, partly because we can meet ASHRAE indoor air quality standards with fewer air changes per hour if you have materials that aren't off-gassing VOCs. This is a data display panel that we were finished sometime during the spring. We're now developing a monitoring platform for the building with the National Renewable Energy Lab, the High Performance Building Group at NREL. So this will be reporting building performance. We'll also have this out on an internet site so you can see how the building is functioning in real time. This is an auditorium. Design Techs did our New York design architectural firm did our seat coverage here. Typically, auditorium seats like you're sitting in are marinated in 20, 30, 40 different chemicals known or suspected to be carcinogenic, mutagenic, or endocrine disruptors. How are you feeling? These are edible fabric. You could eat it. We don't recommend it, but you can eat it. Given the quality of food sometimes in the dining hall, you do see teeth prints on the fabric. This is edible wheat straw acoustical panels, or not edible wheat straw. This is just wheat straw acoustical panels. You probably could eat it. Certified wood again here. This is a maple product. But again, thinking of the materiality of the building, one of the goals here was to lower environmental impacts dramatically. This is some of the students on the roof as the photovoltaic array here is being installed. This is energy performance. Now, this is one of the issues for those of you in the student contingent here. Your generation has to go to a world that releases about 8 billion tons of carbon, or CO2 equivalent in other heat-trapping gases like halon, bromides, chlorofluorocarbons, and so forth. You've got to go from a world that releases 8 billion tons to a world that maybe releases, what, 3 billion tons? World population is now about 6.2 billion people. It will rise in your lifetime to 8 to 9 to 10 billion people. So you take those two ratios, they tell you a whole lot about the parameters of your future. 8 billion divided by 6 billion, 3 billion divided by maybe 8, 9, or 10 billion people. Tells you a whole lot. Can you power civilization by current sunlight? I think the short answer is yes, you can. This is the RPV array. This is the average output in any given day in 12 months of the year. So obviously we peak here in summer months. This is the cumulative total data generated about 75,700 kilowatt hours of electricity per year. For reference, the average home would use about 10 to 12,000 kilowatt hours. So we're roughly 7 households worth. This is the production occurred one day in May, and when the green line here depicts what we're sending out on the grid. Ohio being a net meter of the state, the grid has to buy and sell at the same rate. This is a day in July, and on this particular day we had turned on all the air conditioning in the building, and so we had all systems running. We were still, during that month, exporting more power back to the grid than we were using. So in June, July, August, September, we were generating more power than the building was using. We're averaging from the months of March through last week about 19,000 BTUs per square foot to heat vent light air conditioning, or on heating for most of that time. The average is about 90,000 BTUs per square foot for classroom office buildings. This is the inverter section, DC power coming off the roof here. You have to convert to AC, and then the local utility is responsible for the black box that gets the sine wave right, harmonics right on the current, and then has the